The sun blazed over a Virginia military base as hundreds of soldiers stood in perfect formation for the annual Veterans Tribute. President Donald Trump was about to arrive. Flags waved gently, soft music played, and anticipation hung in the air. Among the ranks stood 22-year-old Private First Class Alina, more new to the base and facing her first major event. Her stance was firm, but her heart raced. She had strict orders. Stay still, stay silent, do nothing out of line. Alina, quiet but resilient, carried the weight of a hard past raised in foster care, never quite fitting in until the Army gave her a home. As the loudspeaker announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States," all eyes turned, but Alina's next move would be the one no one could ignore. Marine One touched down in the distance, kicking up dust as soldiers straightened and the crowd raised their phones. President Trump emerged, surrounded by Secret Service, and every soldier held their salute. Except Alina. She didn't move. She didn't salute. She simply stood, clutching a folded piece of paper tight to her chest. It lasted only seconds, but someone noticed. Camera caught her calm, unwavering gaze, not defiant, not angry, but full of purpose. Whispers began. Who was she? What was in that paper she held like it carried her whole story? As the ceremony continued, Trump shaking hands, cameras rolling backstage, chatter focused on the one soldier who broke formation without saying a word. Colonel Grant, a seasoned officer, had seen it too. After the event, he called out gently, "Moore, walk with me." As they walked behind the barracks, Alina kept her composure. "You didn't salute when the president arrived," Colonel Grant said. "I didn't mean any disrespect, sir," she replied. "Just needed him to see me, that's all." He glanced at the paper in her hand. "What's that?" he asked. She paused and slowly offered it. "It's a letter for the president. I've been rewriting it for months." He took it but didn't open it, he thought, standing there like a statue would get it to him. "No, sir," she said quietly, "but I hoped someone might notice. Maybe someone would ask." Grant looked at her, not with anger but understanding, and handed the letter back. "Tomorrow, I'll see what I can do." That night, Alina sat on her bunk, reading the letter again for what felt like the 100th time. It wasn't angry, and it wasn't political, it was personal. "Dear Mr. President," it began, "you don't know me? Yeah, but you've met someone like me before? Soldier's child, a forgotten face in the system. A girl shuffled through foster homes until the Army gave her a name, a uniform, and a reason to believe. But I'm not writing for me. I'm writing for someone else. Her name was May." Alina stopped there, tears sliding silently down her cheek. May had been her best friend in their last foster home. A year younger. They had made a promise. If one of them ever got out, they'd shine a light for the other. But May didn't make it, and Alina never forgot. She folded the letter tighter this time, uncertain, but holding on to hope. Alina didn't know if anyone would ever read the letter, but writing it had helped her breathe again. Across the barracks, another soldier watched her quietly. She'd seen Alina cry before, but never like this. The next morning, Colonel Grant stood in his office holding the envelope. It wasn't standard procedure to pass personal letters to a visiting president, especially not one like this. But something in Alina's eyes the day before had stuck. With him, the look of someone carrying more than gear, more than duty. He exhaled, walked to his safe, and placed the letter inside. We'd be in Washington the following week for a leadership briefing. Just maybe he'd try. Meanwhile, Alina carried on with her duties, never mentioning the letter again. Her silence said everything. She hadn't handed it over, expecting anything in return. She didn't even expect it to reach him. She just needed someone to care. Enough to try. And that's what made it powerful. That's what made Grant determined. Days later, the Pentagon lobby echoed with sharp footsteps and formal salutes. Colonel Grant moved through the crowd until he spotted Major Stevens, a political liaison with quiet access to presidential staff. Handing him the sealed letter, Grant said simply, "It's not official business." Stevens raised an eyebrow. "You know the odds of this even being read? Just read it first." That night, Stevens didn't. It stopped him cold. The words told of pain, of a life overlooked, and a friend lost not for revenge but for remembrance. The next morning, slipped it into a plain envelope, marked only personal to President Donald J. Trump. Early that day, in the Oval Office, the president sifted through briefings on the economy, its military operations, and veterans' affairs, and still his hand paused on a smaller, handwritten envelope. "Sir, it's a soldier's letter," the assistant said, handing it over. Trump opened it slowly, reading every line, then reading it again. No politics, no demands, just pain, truth, and a name. May. Quietly moved. He circled a word and said, "Get me Colonel Grant." When the call came, Grant was stunned. "Is the girl still stationed with you?" Trump asked. "She is, Sir. Private First Class Alina Moore. Range of visit. No cameras." "It's me and her." 2 days later, Alina, unaware of what to expect, was pulled from training. "You're meeting the president," Grant told her. She froze, nodded, and breathed for the first time in years. When Marine One landed without fanfare, Trump arrived in a simple suit and met Alina in a quiet room. "At ease, soldier," he said. "You wrote me something." "Thank you." Alina looked him in the eyes. "I didn't think you'd read it. I just needed someone to understand." Trump nodded. "Tell me about May." And so, Alina told him about the foster homes, the singing, the promise to escape, and how May never made it. "She took her life, sir," she whispered. "I joined for both of us." The room fell silent, and in an unexpected moment of sincerity, Trump softly said, "I'm sorry, truly." Alina shook her head. "I didn't write to blame anyone. I just want one thing." "What's that?" he asked. "A memorial. Not just for May, but for kids like her, foster kids who served, who had no family but still chose to protect this country." Trump leaned forward as she added, "Just a small plaque on base. That's all." He looked at Colonel Grant, then back at her. "Consider it done." By that evening, whispers spread through the base the president had returned. For one soldier, no cameras, no speech. Soon, construction began quietly near the central courtyard. 2 weeks later, a simple stone plaque was unveiled. "To those who served with no family but their nation." Trump didn't attend. He didn't need to. This wasn't about him. It was about May and every kid like her. Lena stood at the front, hands trembling, whispered May's name and saluted. The story didn't stay quiet. A base reporter wrote about it, and soon social media lit up with praise. Former foster kids who had served shared their own stories, letters poured in,
Yes.
and plaques like Alina's began quietly appearing at bases across the country. She never meant to become a symbol, but she did. Then, one day, a letter arrived not from the president, but from a woman named Carla who once worked at the foster home where May lived. "I remember you both," it read. "To you, she always said, you were a hero." Lena clutched the letter to her chest, tears falling once more, but this time they felt lighter. Months passed, and she was called into Colonel Grant's office again. "You're being promoted," he said. "Your story did more than you think." She smiled, not for the rank or recognition, but because her voice had reached beyond her own pain. During leave, she returned to the small town where it all began, visited the now-closed foster home, and laid flowers at the old tree where May used to sit and dream. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I got outmanned," I remembered. "You." When she returned to base, a box was waiting. Inside was a framed print of her letter, now signed by President Trump. "Your courage speaks louder than any speech I could give. Donald J. Trump." She hung it beside her bunk, not as a trophy, but as proof that words matter. Weeks later, new recruits arrived, and one quiet, nervous girl reminded Alina of May. Alina walked up, offered her hand, and said gently, "You're not alone here." The girl smiled, and for the first time, felt like she belonged. Years later, standing before a new class of recruits, Alina shared her story not with sorrow, but with hope. "I stood holding a letter, not in protest, but in love. I had nothing to give, but I had a voice." She paused, then smiled, and that changed everything. That was the twist.